Thank you for coming. Did everyone enjoy Door County Reads this year or get a chance to see some of the videos or some of the programs?
Yes. Great. It was
Yes.
great.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing what we come up with next year. And I just want to point out something that I don't know if any of you remember. In 2015, we read a book called The White Tiger set in India. And that had, I just happened to notice that was made into a film, and it's on Netflix. So if you want to catch it, it seems like all these good books are being made into films these days. It's a, you know, it's a gold mine for these companies like Netflix and Amazon to just go to these books and make films out of them, because some of them are so well written. So that's all I have to say about that. This book is kind of interesting. I tried really hard to find short videos of the author, because I always like to see those little trailers that they put out, but she's really not out there a lot. There's a little bit of her out there, but she's, you know, certain people just don't seem to want to be recorded a lot. And she seems to be one of them. I don't know why. I don't think it's necessarily a language thing, because she was, you know, educated in this country and looks young and fresh, and I don't think she has a problem with language or anything like that, but she just doesn't appear in many videos. I don't know why. There's quite a few reviews of the book, but not too many with her in them. So I don't have a video to show you today, but I just wanted to start out by saying, I don't know, do any of you remember the book, A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki, which we read in 2014? No?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
That was one of my favorite books for some reason. I don't know, it's a time sort of switching around thing. And Ruth Ozeki's father was actually at the university in, I think, Stevens Point here. So that reminded me a lot of this book. I had a little trouble keeping with the story of this because there were so many levels to it, but what does everyone else think about it?
Yeah.
Do we have anyone who just loved it or anyone who didn't like it?
Well, I have a lot of things to say about it if anybody wants to hear. Having lived in Asia,
Get started and go.
Yeah. One thing we have to remember is that in all of our readings about immigrants, that there are more Chinese immigrants in the country than any other nationality, and especially illegal immigrants right now. So I thought that was kind of important to the story, because this is really a story about reverse immigration, where the Chinese woman goes back to China. And from the Oriental people I know, they all deal with this issue. They deal with the issue of going back to the motherland and feeling a total disconnect. Most of them don't identify with anything in China, even if they were born there as an adult. And yet, when the parenting, Chinese parenting is so foreign to American parenting, and I saw this growing up in a mostly, not growing up, I mean living in a mostly Chinese neighborhood in California, where my children had all Chinese friends. And so the mothers would refer to me as the American, even though they had been there since they were either children or teenagers. And their style of parenting is very punitive. They believe in not spoiling the child, but using the rod. So the kids' experiences with their Chinese friends, and then knowing some that as adults went back to China and then didn't feel any identification with them, it made me feel that they have lost a lot. The parents do not want their children to know about their history, which is unusual, because they want them to grow up as Americans. It's very important to grow up as an American. And so they don't want to know they don't let them know their history, and yet they make them go to Chinese school also to learn the language. So they grow up knowing the Chinese, but they don't know anything about the history. And it was very moving to think of both the author and being born on a very important day in Chinese history, and that kind of spurring her to write the story. But another thing was, I don't know how American audiences, unless they've studied Chinese culture, can understand the importance of ghosts in China and in Chinese life, and even in Chinese modern life. If you go to most Chinese homes, or if you go to Chinatown, you will see a lot of the trappings of this ghost culture. So, I read a lot of the interviews with her and a lot of the reviews of the book, and none of them really touch on this because I don't think they know about it. And I was surprised, and I'm not sure. She put it in the book. I mean, it's everywhere in the book, of course, and when she gets back to China, and but you really have to research where this is coming from. Why? What is the importance of ghosts in the book, and what in Chinese society? Very important.
Yeah, that's, well, I think that's why we study the different multicultural books.
Yes.
Learn
Yeah.
something about different
Yeah,
cultures.
but she doesn't really, she
Explain
doesn't,
it. Yeah.
yeah, explain it. As I was reading it, that was the thing that stood out to me. I thought, how can anyone understand this book without understanding the importance of ancestor worship? And that's exactly what it is. In China, they worship ancestors. They have altars in their homes, and they put out food. And we have nothing like that in our culture.
Isn't there something like it with the Mexican Day of the Dead and that?
Exactly. In Mexican, exactly. But not in our culture. That's Mexican culture. Definitely in Mexico, though.
And a lot of it I put down to the physics and, the time, space time and that whole thing. Thinking that was the idea of the woman, Sulan, right? And so that's all part of physics.
Yes. Yes.
So I didn't even think about the whole ancestor thing
Yes.
you're bringing up, and I see your point.
Yep.
Anyone else have experience?
It'll expand your the depth of the complexity of the book. It's very complex, and that really expands the complexity of it. Is that whole ghost culture? We don't believe in ghosts. They do. Even modern Chinese people believe in ghosts. So
when the Mexicans celebrate the Day of the Dead, it's when the monarchs return on their migration to Mexico, and they believe that the monarchs are their souls of their ancestors.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah,
They
you'd
put out
think
flowers that attracts they have picnics in their cemeteries, and they put out flowers to attract the butterflies.
yes.
And
Well,
they have
this is
parades with flowers in their hair and
and this is a
monarch
whole nother thing because of the incorporation into Catholicism, the whole ancestor thing with Catholicism. But in China, they don't. The souls are just kind of out there, they're until reincarnation comes. They don't inhabit anything, but yet they're mentioned. I don't know if you ever read any of the Amy Tan books in the
Yeah.
club.
yes.
Yeah. So there's another example, of the lot. She brings in a lot of the superstitions of ghost culture there, and in China, the way they build their houses, they have to have a wall outside so that the ghosts are tricked and they can't get in. And we have nothing like that. They don't know how to get in because of the way the wall is, and you have to kind of go around the wall. to keep
There
ghosts
were-
from coming in.
There were several mentions in the book of a character thinking that they saw Sulan. Look out the window and on the sidewalk, there's
Yep.
somebody that they thought they recognized, and then
Yes.
they talked themselves out of it. Well, that could have been, but as you say, she never mentioned it. They could have thought to themselves, oh, it's just a ghost. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm just seeing
The
the
neighbor,
ghost.
well, the neighbor is the one that is the most vocal about the ghost stuff. The neighbor that she
Yeah.
finds, the old neighbor.
Oh, yes, yeah,
Yes.
the woman in
Yes.
Shanghai.
Yes.
Well, that is all fascinating, but the whole time I thought this was physics.
Yeah.
Because I've been to
But
talks
see,
on
that's-
theoretical physics.
But that's why it's so complex. That's why what makes
Yeah.
it another thing that makes it so complex. I mean, she could have picked any kind of occupation, but the fact that she did pick
Yeah.
that physics shows that she definitely was trying to give that complexity.
Yeah, and you wonder about her background. I did, the odd thing is I was looking up her name and I came across a man who has exactly the same name, Meng, and he is involved with NASA and physics. So
Maybe that's where she
funny.
got it.
Yeah, I don't know much about her name construction, or, I know Korean names, they do them sort of backwards, but I don't know about Chinese. Do you know anything about that? And I just couldn't find out too much about this author herself beyond the fact that she went to school here. She went to Harvard and to Hunter in New York. So she's seems pretty well educated.
Hunter College. Yep.
Yeah.
And she was
she is
born as the same day.
She's now in San Francisco.
Is she?
She is in San Francisco now. I was just before we signed on, I was listening to it like a 5-minute interview with Scott Simon on NPR, and it was good but very brief. And what did she say? I don't know. Place changes you. Place changes you was one of the things she said in that end. So talking about the difference between, she was born in China, came to the US at age 5.
Laura, you
So,
mentioned the physics,
That's all I know.
yet her occupation, her mental occupation was with time and how there was different places in time and moving through time. So when you think about it, that's kind of a ghost thing where you can leave
Yeah.
one time and show up in a different time. And so it kind of ties the two together, the physics and the.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
And that Ruth Ozeki book also, The Tale for the Time Being, that was a really strange one where the girl was it Japan, was writing in the diary, and it ended up being
Yes, yes.
the water and ended up in like the west coast of the United
Yeah, okay, now I remember the
That
book.
one?
yeah.
That's now I.
And so they were reading it from the past, but it was another play with the time thing.
Yeah.
So it seems to be another concept where they're dealing with the time differences. But that I think was Japan.
One of the things I wrote down was the epigraph in the very beginning of the book, that was the past is not for living in. So there again is that idea of time and the ancestry. The past is not for living in. So
Yeah.
kind of ties that together too.
Another quote that I have here is how to remember the future and forget the past. It apparently appears a couple times in the novel. This is one of the questions I have here. And so it's the question is, but what about the present? Do the characters interact with it? And so I started looking that up, and of course that led me to physics again. And there's apparently Einstein's problem of now. So I kept going back to physics. So I think it is a brilliant idea to do that. Plus the fact that the Sulan's theory was the reverse of, is it the second law of thermodynamics? Where instead of going to chaos, you go to order.
Yes, yes.
So that was a brilliant play on all of those things with the Chinese culture.
And tying it together.
Arlen, did you live in Asia? You
Yes,
said
I was in a Peace Corps in Borneo. And then
Borneo.
my son lived in China for 6 years in various positions. And so I visited him while he lived there,
Oh.
different cities. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's always been one of my hobbies, Asian culture. He has his one of his degrees in Asian studies. So he kind of picked that up for me.
What did everyone else think about it?
I found it extremely difficult, confusing, and I gave up on it.
Oh,
But listening, the reason I'm here is to find out why I shouldn't have done that. And I'm now seeing things or hearing things that I didn't get at all.
But because you don't know anything about the culture, that's why I couldn't figure
No,
out
I
how
am
anybody
familiar.
could
I am
understand
familiar.
it. Yeah.
I disagree with you there. I am
Oh.
familiar. I just found the book difficult. I didn't find it appealing at all. I found it, I kept trying and trying, and I found her just all over the board as an author. I didn't know who I was with or what was going on. I found it tedious. Wasn't a favorite.
I will say that I listened to the audiobook, and that may help because the voices were different. It wasn't read by one
Yeah,
person.
that's very true. This is also helping. That's one of the reasons I'm here, to understand what I didn't see, and I'm getting it. So thank you.
One of the things I did, Trista, was that as I was reading, I kind of made a timeline, like
Uh-huh.
as much as I could
oh,
fill in where I was. So it actually, where was Sulan is where I was filling in, from poverty to the school to Shanghai and Beijing. So that helped me kind of follow it along. When we would move to a new time period or a new place, I'd go, okay, this is when, so that helped too.
Okay.
Well, my question
I
would,
agree with Trissa. I had trouble following the book when she was older and reflecting back. The reflecting back wasn't in consecutive order. It was just all over the place. And like I reread the beginning of the book or listened to it because I listened to it on disc. They went on and on about this nurse and about the blood in the hospital on the operation floor. And I thought, why are they going so long and into so much detail on this one thing? And then later on in the book, when she was going to bring the daughter was bringing the mother's ashes back. I didn't know, I thought it was Sulu that was doing that. And I got mixed up. It took quite a while for me to figure out that it was the daughter bringing the mother's ashes back, because she said her mother was along. And I thought, what is going on?
That's the ghost.
Well, there was a lot of that going on in the book.
And I had trouble with the characters and the names. I finally ended up writing the characters' names down, and that helped me keep who was who. And obviously that just has to do with the Asian naming system. But two things that were really important in the story got no mention at all. And of course, just very little mention, and one is the Cultural Revolution, which made such a difference in her growing up years and leaving home, the Cultural Revolution, and then Tiananmen Square. And those were two big things in the book, but they just were casually mentioned, but really were factors that changed the lives. The other thing that I thought was interesting, the daughter coming back to China, she was only 17 years old. That she seemed awfully young to be doing that. And where did she get the money? There were some questions, but maybe that's the magic realism. If there is such a thing in this book, I don't know. It could be the ghost.
I didn't realize she was so young. I guess.
she was born on
Yeah,
the
you're right.
Revolution Day.
But didn't it say she was 17?
I got the impression.
2 years old. Wasn't she 2 years old when they immigrated to the United States? I agree. I thought she was incredibly young, but I think she was like 19. Big deal. That's still really young. To bark on what she was doing.
I don't think she knew how old she was. Didn't the mother change the birth certificate? Or change the,
Well, that's true too, yeah.
She was,
She
But
was
that
a
was
year
only by a year.
younger than she thought, because she was born in 89 instead of 88.
Well, she thought her mother did that so that she could go to school sooner
Yeah,
once they were in the United States. But
Right.
how she changed the passport, I don't know. That still escapes me.
the
well,
ghost.
I
and
could,
go ahead.
no, nothing.
Well, and I think, yeah, I think so she could go to school earlier, but also she didn't want her to have been born on the day of Tiananmen Square. Wasn't that another
Yes.
thing that was
And
brought
so
up in
had-
the book?
Oh,
And so,
could be. Yeah.
so was the author. The author was born that also the same day as her protagonist.
I didn't catch that.
Was she really?
Ah.
I mean, the real author?
Yes, yes, the real author. Yeah.
So in a way,
Shanghai.
she built the story around the birth date.
Yeah.
She probably imagined the whole story backwards from the time of her own birth date,
Right. Yeah.
Could very
what
well
that
be.
could have meant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She said her real father would have been protesting, except that she was born,
Mhm.
so that he missed it.
Uh-huh.
Do you think the father died at Tiananmen Square, or do you think he just abandoned them?
He went and picked up a passport from a dying or already dead protester and took a new identity and never went back to the hospital in the story.
What a
Yeah,
leaker.
that's very clear. He took a new identity and he left. He simply abandoned the wife and the newborn to whatever might happen to them.
He said he was getting his freedom. That was
Yeah,
the
he was
way.
not a very
Huh?
admirable character.
Well,
I must miss that part.
I thought that most people would not like the book because the characters are not likable. They're
that's true.
very Chinese, and and if you know a lot about the Chinese culture, it's very difficult to like either the way that they are portrayed or they want to portray themselves. It's a definite cultural difference as far as how they want to be perceived. It's not to be liked. So when I was reading the book, I thought, I don't think anybody's going to like this book, because you can't like the characters because of their values and their culture. So you have to remember that, I
like
think.
Woman.
I like Sangbo.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
the one I liked the best too. But the main character, the physicist, she was not real likable. She seemed all involved with herself. She didn't care for her kid. She didn't like either of the men that well, and just kind of married one, and then she wasn't happy having a child. And then once she went to America, she didn't do well either.
Yeah, that was sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It didn't treat her daughter very well, but that seems to be family tradition.
And then when the daughter went
you-
back and
can you
talked to the neighbor, the mother had never mentioned the neighbor to her,
Yeah.
and the neighbor had been such a support for her.
Yeah.
But can you generalize and say that the mother was typically Chinese? I think she was typically a screwed up person for lots of reasons.
You mean Sulan?
Yeah.
Yes,
That
I
was
think that's the one. I don't think you can say that she's typically Chinese. I don't think that you can say that typically Chinese people are unnice. You know,
No, I'm not saying
I
that
mean,
they're
I
not
don't think
nice.
it's
I'm
typical
saying
that-
I'm saying that it's important in the culture. Their values are different. It is not important for them to be perceived as nice or likable, and it's just not one of their values. They don't.
But they
They
are
don't
good.
care
Well,
if
do you
they are
think
like.
that
Doesn't
Sulan
mean
was
that they're not
typical?
nice. That doesn't mean that they're not nice. And you know, if you get to know some of them, they are nice. But that's not a cultural value for them to be liked. And I don't know you know, I've talked to my son about this, why they don't want to be liked. It's kind of a, you know, it's almost like a chip on the shoulder type of thing, where there is just likability is not considered an attribute.
But they are good mothers and they're good caretakers of their children, and she clearly was not.
Yeah.
But also there is that dimension of
Yeah.
the fact that they respect the ancestors so much and honor them, but they didn't seem to get along with them.
Yeah.
Nobody, the parents don't like the kids and the kids don't like the parents and on down. I mean, all of the, like the different boys and.
In China today, people give their kids to the grandparents to raise in the country while they work in the city, and they only see their children on holidays.
Oh,
I have
sounds
heard
like a
of that.
horrible life.
So I talked to lots of people in China who, you know, who talk about their children a lot and miss their children, but they don't raise their children. And this is another connected thing to the ancestor type thing. You know, old people are revered. My son was very popular in China because he took his old mother everywhere. And so everybody, they all looked at him as a possible match for their daughters because they knew he was a wonderful son.
Wow.
And he does have a long-term Chinese girlfriend. So one got him.
Well, do you think the daughter achieved what she had hoped to achieve? I mean, she lost the ashes. That was kind of amazing, but did she?
But it did get it. She did return her mother to the homeland, even though it wasn't to a specific place. So
Did her mother want to go?
Her dress, she had her mother's yellow dress.
Yeah.
That seemed to be
they
significant
burned that-
throughout the book.
Did they burn that yellow dress when they were? I thought there was a scene where that dress was.
Yes, it was burned in the family cemetery. She went with her grandmother and they went from ancestor's grave to ancestor's grave, and they ended up at the last one, which must have been the most current generation. And there they burned the dress. And I think the letters probably said something about papers, and she, yeah.
Yeah, for a lot of the book, it was hard for me, but when we finally got to that last chapter with the daughter returning to China, that brought things together, I thought, in a more satisfying way.
And I don't know why, when she was talking to the doctor, that was her father, right? Or was it not really her father? I never quite got that straight.
Wasn't that the other boyfriend? The
That was
she
the other
got married?
boyfriend, right?
That was the other boyfriend, yeah.
Oh.
I think
But
one of the things she went there for was to find out what really happened to her father.
Yeah.
And didn't she see him outside the building, but never did confront him?
Yes.
At
Yes.
the end? Yeah.
Mhm.
And he saw her, more importantly, and she
But-
looked
but
like her
did he-
mother.
Oh, that's right.
Oh,
She
yeah.
convinced herself later on in life that it was just a wish that she had wanted him to see him so bad that the first person that came out of that building was him, and just because that's what she wanted and nobody else came out of that building. So it must have been her just wanting so badly that this was her father, that it really wasn't.
Oh,
That's
no,
what
I
it
got the
was.
impression it
She
really was
justif-
her father.
I thought so
She-
too.
It
I thought
it was, but to make it easier on herself, she justified it in her
Oh.
own mind that it was not her father.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Pretty strange.
Yeah,
He had children with him, didn't he? Didn't he have a couple
Yeah,
children
One.
with him?
yeah.
A daughter.
7-year-old girl.
Child, yeah.
Is that why he did not confront him, do you think?
I don't know.
I
don't
think,
know
Chris-
why-
I
don't
think
know why
Kristen's right.
It
She
was
she knew
confusing.
it was him.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was very confusing, and there was some mention of her face and everything looking like specific people.
Yeah.
Right.
All they have to do now is DNA and they could figure it out. But, so whose life did you think was more successful? The daughter Liya or Sulan?
Neither.
Well, the daughter's not old enough yet. She's still.
No, she wasn't old enough to know what her
young.
life would turn out to be, but
I don't think the mother certainly wasn't successful. She never got
Failed at everything.
where she was going physically with her physics, and she never found stable work or stable occupation in the United States. She would go from one place to another. So I had trouble liking any of the characters in the book, to be very honest.
Yep. But remember what I said, it's not about being a likable person.
I
But
agree.
was that because they were Chinese? I mean, Sulan was a terribly, she moved from, once she comes to the United States to be a physicist, and she can't settle in anything there. She can never find anything that works for her. She is just a very tragic, flawed human being. And
You want to be happy.
she can't find any niche that she's happy in.
I thought that part of that was her research, her time research, and that it became an obsession with her. I thought that was part of what kind of took over her thinking. I got that impression anyway.
Okay. I just think I just think that there's definitely something to be learned about Chinese culture, but I don't think that these are typical Chinese people. I think these are tragic people within a culture that doesn't necessarily approach things the way we do, but does that, I don't know. I just don't want to make any big broad brush here. I think Sulan was a tragic figure, and she had lots of tragedy in her life. I think she was a flawed human being.
One thing that's I learned about China after the Cultural Revolution, when I was teaching, I had Chinese students. There were 1/3 of Malaysia is Chinese, and their demeanor was extremely, at that time, East Asian or Eastern, and as opposed to Western. And they were very, the school was number one. They were very interested in school, and they were very docile. Then by the time my son was an adult and went over there and one of the things he did do was teach at different levels, from little kids to college level. And he told me what it was like there now. And the emphasis is not so much on respect for the elders or the ancestors. It's about succeeding. And so this also was a theme in the book about her, like we just talked about, her lack of success. And but they do now, instead of being respectful to elders and to old people, the younger ones are they cheat in their classes, and they do everything they can just for the one goal of getting through school and getting a good job. And they have an extremely high suicide rate, because if they fail, it's like all over for them. The pressure is so high on these children that I couldn't believe the stories of suicide that my son told me. And this is
Aw.
among young children too. It's not just high school students, it's grade school students, because of this pressure. And so when I went over there, of course, he happened to be teaching grade school at the time. And so I had to go in the classroom, being a teacher myself, and I couldn't believe the difference. You can't, uh, you just the way they are raised now by the grandparents, they spoil them like any other grandparent would. There's no discipline. Whereas the kids that I taught were extremely disciplined. So there's this huge gap where they're not being raised by their children and taught these things. They're being spoiled by their grandparents. And to me, it was just very obvious, the difference in that many years from when I taught there until when my son taught there. So it was the whole thing was extremely interesting to me because of the change, and how sad that the pressure, and of course that pressure carries over to here when my children's Chinese friends are no longer their friends because of the way that they were brought up as with this pressure to succeed. They lack any social skills. They always had to be studying, always had to be going to classes and schools. They didn't develop socially at all. And my kids have talked about this with their former friends. Why aren't they friends anymore? And the Chinese children have told them, because we had no other life other than we had to become an engineer, and this was our focus. And so they can't talk about anything else except their job. And when you now my children are in management and have a lot of Chinese employees, and they have a lot of Indian employees, and they can see the same thing. And of course they can't be friends with them now because they're the managers, but they see how hard it is for the Chinese employees and even more so the Indian employees, another high immigrant population and illegal immigrant population, is that they have to stick together, and they have to uh, live together because they can't assimilate because they have no skills.
Is that
do
in
so.
China that they're?
Here, I'm talking about here. My kids,
Here.
my kids are both my sons are in management in different companies that have well, one's in California, and that's almost all his employees, all his engineers. He's a manager in the engineering department. They're all Chinese or Indian,
Mhm.
and so having had a lot of um, having lived in a Chinese community, we we have watched these kids grow up, and we see what happened, how hard it is to assimilate now.
Do you think the
So it's
government has any influence on any of this?
the government,
Wait, are we talking about or the United
Chinese
States?
government?
Chinese
I'm
government, I
confused.
mean, the history of Chinese government and rigidity.
Well, there was a huge difference in the post Cultural Revolution, of course.
And the control of boys versus
Yes,
girls.
and the whole one child only. Just think about that. So you can only have one child, and then you don't even get to raise them because you have to go to work and make all this money so that your child can go to the best schools. So they're raised by their grandparents, and yes, they seem to have plenty of money. Everyone has cell phones and the latest everything, but I just feel sorry for China because they lost their culture somewhere in between this Cultural Revolution and modern day. That's the only thing how I can put it, is that um, they're they're just not what they were. They're not the culture isn't what they were, and a lot of it was the one child only thing. None of these children have siblings. Can you imagine yourself without siblings? I mean, almost all of us have siblings, and then to be raised, all of us being raised by our grandparents. And they just have no, your siblings, as you grow older, it's like your parents die and your grandparents die, and that's all you have of your family and that extended family. So to not have that, it just makes them so different. And when I talk to my son's girlfriends over the years, the cultural differences are just huge, just huge.
Do you think that, like Sulan's theory of physics is that time can run backwards? Do you think that's a way of mentally trying to reorganize things of the past and maybe make it better? She didn't seem to really care too much to make it better, though, did she? She just wanted to
Well,
be successful.
I was going to say, don't you think that the difference between poverty and wealth was another thought in there, because both Sulan and Bo were from poverty, and yet they had this opportunity to get away from the poverty, and yet that seemed to be a big driving force for a while there too.
And that's another one of my points is poverty in China is not what we think of as poverty here. And people, everyone always talks about the poor people in China. And when you're in China, and when they talk about the Long Tang and all those old neighborhoods are being torn down now and replaced with these modern concrete ugly buildings. And so the old neighborhoods are being lost. And yes, their homes are very simple and they have few possessions, but the having lived in the jungles of Borneo, when I think of poverty, you can't just blanket term everybody as being poor just because they don't have what we have in our culture, or they don't have what European culture has. They have a different culture. So different things are important, and it's not, yes, China had gone through the same cultural industrialization that we did, only that much later. But they did the same things. Like I don't know if you read The Devil in the White City in the book group, but the things they talk about, how America industrialized, the same thing, the same treatment of human beings in China, where they don't pay them until the job is finished, and then they overwork them, so they quit, and then they end up never having to pay them. The same thing in China. But the poverty is not, you can't say, oh, everybody is poor in China, because they don't think of themselves as poor. When you go around China and you see these villages that have medieval architecture and different things that are we think, oh, it's they're all poor, but they aren't. It's just
Well,
the way the culture. Huh. The definition of poverty.
there's a lot of wealth. I mean, if you see the pictures of those, well, even Wuhan is a city of skyscrapers. Looks like it has a great infrastructure, many bridges. I mean, there's a lot of wealth in China now, I think. I think it's really changed in the last several decades.
Yes, that's my point. It's not, it's just been such a change in a shorter period of time.
So what was that last chapter all about? The girl goes to the village where the mother originally came from. Is that a farming village?
Mm-hmm.
And did she see the grandmother really, or was that a ghost? I didn't even get that.
That's a mystery.
I thought it was real when I read.
I thought it was real too.
I did too, but now I'm wondering.
I even wrote notes. I wrote the last few pages and I wrote 3 question marks because I went, I thought maybe we would talk about it. Yeah, it wasn't.
Hey, what did you think then?
Yeah, because it was confusing.
I kind of liked the idea that she went back to see the actual grandmother, because all she knew was the mother herself, who Sulan, who didn't treat her all that well. But
Right.
then the grandmother wasn't very friendly either.
And this is touted as the main theme in the book. If you read all the reviews about the book, is that it's a
The
story of
generation?
reverse immigration. Immigrants that come here and then they go home. And so that's the seeing the grandmother and everything, that is reverse immigration. You go back to your roots.
Do you think she would?
But I
stay
don't think
there?
the daughter was going back. She was just visiting. I don't think she was immigrating back, was she?
We don't
No.
know. We don't know if she came back home though. We don't know if she came back. Do we? Yeah, that
I
doesn't-
thought she
doesn't
did.
come back.
I never got the impression she was intending to stay, that she was
No.
just
I
going to
agree.
take the
Yeah.
ashes back.
Although she did mention she gave, I guess I got the impression she was in college because it said she gave up her room. Her roommate said they came and took all your stuff out of your room. I got that impression. So it sounded like she gave all that up. So,
In
And
the
it's not important. It's really not important whether she goes back. It's the fact that or she comes back. It's the fact that she went. The whole immigration story of people, all the Chinese that came to America and all the stories of building the railway and all that stuff. And then she goes back and sees where her mother came from and finds all that out, because remember, the parents don't tell the kids those things.
Right, and she didn't even know when she was really born. Right? She had to figure that out.
Yeah, parents don't tell them. The Chinese kids I know nothing about their parents and their history. They don't want them to know.
Yeah, and I'll say, I'm married to someone born in a different country, and my experience is I'm kind of shocked when they don't tell people in the family when someone's sick and all this sort of thing. They're always thinking they're
Definitely.
hiding everything in order to save everyone's feelings, but there's something really disturbing about it. So I think that's maybe true in this situation also.
But it's cultural. It's all cultural.
Yeah. Yeah, and here we are in the Midwest where being friendly is considered like apparently extreme compared to some parts of the United States even, right?
Right, right.
So that's a real contrast.
I think Su Lin would have been better off staying in China or going back. She excelled in her class. She was, the top of her class. And I don't know where she stood in America or what she did, but it didn't sound very good.
Except that there
Did
was
they
the
say what
Tiananmen Square situation. That
What did
might
she do in America?
Tried to get a job.
Wandered
She working at
around
the
from one
universities, but
academic
she kept
program to
moving.
another.
Bill.
She really wasn't in other people at all. I mean, that was part of the reason I think she couldn't be successful in the United States. She was intensely involved in her science, but not intensely, not involved with people in any meaningful way, I didn't think. In the United
And I
States.
kind of got the impression her science didn't necessarily agree, or her thinking did not necessarily agree with the rest of her colleagues.
Yeah, she was very theoretical and didn't seem to be able to pull it together enough to sell that to everyone.
I thought the way that she could put on the fancy clothes and dress and actually be another whole person, it was like a costume for her. That she could become this, especially when they talk about how she was dressed and beautiful and everything was perfect, but that really wasn't who she was. I thought that was interesting.
And even put like little rouge on her daughter, like
Yes.
used her daughter in that prop way too.
Mhm. Yeah.
What did you think the name of the book?
Yeah, Little Gods.
God.
Well, that was referenced in the talk about what was happening in Tiananmen Square at the time, because they said whoever at that point was talking, was that the people, the revolutionaries were in there and they were like little gods. All they want to do is control. That was the part that referenced that title, that word, the words,
Yeah.
little gods,
It was the nurse, I think it was the nurse in the hospital.
talking about what was happening outside. Yeah.
So the nurse was against the revolutionaries?
Yeah, she thought they were little gods wanting to change things for themselves.
Almost like.
But I still didn't quite understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that was that literal meaning. Now, whether there was another meaning deeper than that, I don't know. But that was the literal, that's where I picked up that phrase in that part. Mhm.
The elderly neighbor in Shanghai had a little kind of an altar to her dead husband. She didn't
Yeah.
at first, but then she decided to put one together, and she gathered different things to place on this altar, and eventually put a photograph of Sulan there, I think, or Sulan's husband after she thought he was dead. And she mentioned using the little gods at the altar.
Okay.
You're right.
Oh,
That was very early
Huh.
on.
Yeah, that was early in the book.
I picked up the phrase because I'm always looking for where the title comes from for the books.
Good for you.
didn't her husband go up the stairs and lay down in bed with her?
Ooh.
The ghost of her husband.
Oh, the ghost,
Ghost of her
yes.
husband, yeah, yeah.
And at the end of the
This is
book,
really weird.
at the end of the book where the author is talking about what happened to everyone, it was more or less a summary in the last 2 pages. And one of them said that the Shanghai woman's husband came and took her hand and showed her how to see things in the dark and led her off, which I took to mean that she probably died as well. And but the husband showed her off into the underworld.
And it's
And
just
yeah,
like
didn't they tore down the building too?
Yeah. When the daughter tried to come back, she was at first confused. She kept passing the pharmacy on the corner and then realized that the construction equipment was there and the building was gone, and that meant the old woman was gone. And the room that had been her mother's and her father's.
I thought it was interesting and confusing, though, that the woman had kept that room. And apparently the mother had paid rent on it or something for all those years. That I didn't quite understand. But
she left money behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, she didn't send money, but she had left money, and it was enough.
So at one hand, you have everything being torn down and changed, and on the other hand, there's that one room staying the same until the daughter comes to be able to see the things there.
Mhm.
And that's what's happening all over China, is all the old architecture is being torn down. And so that's another, I'm sure that was important to the author to bring that in. How about how sad that is?
Yeah, I keep seeing it in the physics thing of parallel dimensions instead of ghosts. The people are there in different, I guess I'm too based in that science.
But they don't go to heaven or hell. They just float around out there. They do. The souls just float around.
They don't want to do.
It's a point of where you are in time and space. You can be, crossing someone at different points. Well, I hope everyone at least liked the challenge of this book.
I think it was a great book for us to read. And you're right, Laura, it was a challenge. It was a challenge for me, and I think from what I'm hearing for other people. But talk about a multicultural book. The author was Chinese, but raised in America, but writing about China. I think it was a perfect book for our group to read, even though I struggled with it. I'm not. but
Well,
it was
I'm
a good,
glad,
You're not alone.
Yeah,
I'm
you're
glad,
not alone.
I'm glad we had Arlen.
Yes,
Yes.
That was
Yes.
Thanks.
very
Very
revealing.
helpful.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah. It seems
Very-
like in this group, there's always someone who steps up who's had an experience in some situation that's
Yeah.
very beneficial
Yeah.
for our understanding.
Because we're
It
old,
does.
Laura.
We're so lucky. We're so lucky.
Yep, exactly.
I just saw a report recently that China's goal was to be #1 in artificial intelligence within the next few years. You know, that they admitted they'd done a lot of copying, which is probably all the copyright stealing, but now they're overtaking all the other countries in artificial intelligence.
Which is frightening.
Yeah.
Have you seen how they identify people on the street through?
Oh, facial, they use
recognition, and if
facial
you
recognition for everything.
Cross
you know.
the jaywalk or something, they catch you.
Yeah.
All sorts of terrible things.
Yeah.
Has anyone ever heard of MyHeritage and that what they're doing? That's a side issue, but MyHeritage is a genealogy site. And they're taking, right now you can take an old photograph of an ancestor and animate it.
Cool.
And it's
That'd be
very
fun. Yeah.
frightening.
Yeah.
Kind of frightening to see that. But that's AI of the future.
And remember in China now too, they don't even have money. You have to use a card for everything.
Mhm.
Nobody
really?
takes money anymore. I mean, it's just, it really is a different world.
In the
you
card,
just
instead
get
of a
it.
password, it's facial recognition. So
Yep.
you don't know passwords, which is kind of nice.
Well,
Yeah.
No privacy.
Mhm.
Is not.
Well, okay, I guess we can wrap this up. It's about an hour now. The
I
next
can't-
book we're reading is The Lying Life of Adults in
Yeah.
Italy. So
I
that should be a
I
big
can't
book.
wait to talk about that one in this in the Italian culture and see what everyone has to say about that.
So much more emotionalism, right?
Woo.
That
wonder
was a
who-
a handful, you're
Nice
right.
to see everybody.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
Great.
I haven't
Thank you very
been
much.
on Zoom very long. Ruth had to help me along.
I'm glad you finally made it in.
I'm glad you zoomed.
Has anyone read the one for next month yet? Besides me and
Yes.
Linda and
Yes,
I?
I
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, not my favorite book, I'm sorry. Not my-
Where did
No.
you hear that?
Beautiful
Okay,
writing.
I
Beautiful
am
writing.
not my favorite.
Well, and I am a huge Elena Ferrante fan. I've read everything she's written.
Yeah.
But this one is not my
Yeah.
favorite either.
I'm sorry to hear that because I was looking forward to it.
Oh,
Well, maybe you'll
what's,
have a good insight.
Beautiful
I think-
writing. You know. Good to
Well,
see
maybe
you, Ruth.
since you've heard bad remarks, you'll appreciate it, be better than what you thought it was.
We'll have to find the good points. Yeah.
Frederick Bachman's coming up.
Hey,
Well, that's an odd book too, but
Which one?
Which one is that?
Frederick
is it?
Bachman's book,
Anxious people.
yeah.
Anxious
Oh.
people. So.
Oh, I just finished that one too. Yeah.
I'm enjoying that one. That one reminds me a lot of his one that he wrote. Remember, my grandmother told me to tell you
Yep.
she's sorry.
Yep.
It really is a lot like that book. It is, I'm enjoying that one.
Good, good.
Totally
Something to look forward to. Well, it's always fun to look forward to seeing all of you here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good, true,
Yeah,
Laura.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Have a good
Okay.
one.